Welcome back, my moms. The interview that you're about to see is actually the reason why I didn't give up on this podcast. I hear the doorbell ring and I was walking to my front door to let Jordan in. And as I was doing that, I was thinking, I don't know if I can keep going with this. Like, this is so much time, energy, and effort. We're doing all of this on our own, and it's just so much investment. And I've known for a long time that a part of my life mission is to help strengthen mothers. But when we started this podcast, we got crazy amounts of opposition, like weird, crazy things. Like one of which was my daughter, who was 1 at the time, started having seizures. We were having ambulance rides and it was chaos. It was horrible. And then I sat down with Jordan, a woman that I had never once met before, and she bore her soul to me because she wants someone out there to know that they can make it through the hard. She gave me hope that night that despite us struggling through learning how to use our audio equipment and video equipment and lighting equipment, that maybe despite all of our failures, what actually matters is that maybe I can help moms out there to know that others care about you and your struggles. Because of this interview, I didn't give up, and I hope that in whatever endeavor you're facing in your life, I hope you don't give up either. Let's meet Jordan. Okay, we have Jordan Robertson here, and I'm so grateful that she decided to come and be a part of this because I feel like we have a lot to learn from you. You have an immense experience on the topic with your own personal experiences and also your education, that you're doing your PhD right now and researching. Can you tell me a little bit about just the research that you've been doing?
Sure. I research grief. So not everyone jumps at that at that as a research topic, but it's just something that from my life experience, I felt like we need to know more about this because we don't do it very well.
Yes.
And so I started out reading all the children's literature on death. And so that means like picture books for kids about people who have died. And so I went through with a professor and we tried to find every book that we could. We ended with like 190.
Wow.
And kind of organized them and looked through like who died, what happened, what's the experience of the child, what does it say about the afterlife, how do they process the experience, and kind of made this huge sheet about it. And so then we were like, what do we do with this? And so we've written an article kind of synthesizing like what exists in children's literature so people can know. And then my actual dissertation is we worked with grandmothers who are helping their grandchildren who are grieving. So
fascinating.
Like the grandmother's own child died, their in-law child died, or a grandchild died, and they're helping the surviving siblings. And so we had them kind of look through the books and give us feedback because adults are the gatekeepers for children's literature. And we feel like if they don't know that these books exist, aren't interested in them, they'll never get to children.
Right.
So it was super great. It's been really interesting to learn kind of their thoughts about it, about their grieving experience. Grandparents are not someone you consider typically in the grief experience of a nuclear family, but they are impacted just as much because these are their children or grandchildren who are dying.
So how did you think to kind of look at this multi-generational approach?
Yeah.
Like how did you get
Okay,
to
honestly, because it was easier to work with grandmothers than with children. And not that children are easy to work with, but just the hoops you have to go through to do research with children, first of all, and then to do research with children who are bereaved because they're in a really tender spot. And that's not to say that's something we won't still do, but initially it was just like feasibility. It was easier to work with grandmothers.
Yes.
But then as we've since done it, it was like, oh, this is the population to work with, because if they can gain information, learn about the resources that exist, they can share that with their whole families. And grandmothers have huge networks.
That's
like
true.
Networks of neighbors, relatives, like they've been building their whole lives.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that is beautiful. And so can we go into how you picked this program, why you decided grief, what drew you to that, and how it started?
Sure. It started from my husband dying, which is super sad. And He was diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer in January of 2014. So it's been 9 years.
9 years.
Yeah. And it's a cancer that most people pass away. Like the average life expectancy is 14 months. And so at the time we have 3 girls, and then I had a 2-month-old little baby.
Oh.
And it manifests in people differently, but his like onset in a day. And so in a period of 12 hours, we found out, we went from being like, he went to work, things were fine, to there's something in his brain. And then 2 weeks later, we found out it was this type of cancer.
Whoa. So. And you had a 2-month-old.
Yeah.
Oh, my heart just like, how did you handle that? That baby's still like not sleeping at that point.
Yeah. No.
And you're not sleeping, and you just heard the hardest news of your life.
Yeah.
How did you process that? And how fast that happened?
Yeah.
That is so much. And so your children were all very young when
so
this
our
happened.
oldest was 7. She was like about to turn 8. 7, 5, 3 were the age of our... No. Our 2 had turned. So 7, 6, and 4 were our 3 girls. And then our little guy was...
Wow.
Yeah, 10 weeks.
10 weeks old when you...
Yeah.
Wow. That is incredible. So you went through this experience, not just with one baby, 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
You find out your husband's going to pass away. What did you do to make it through? I mean, grief obviously doesn't just start when someone passes away.
Yeah.
I'm sure it started the moment you found out something's not right. How did you go through that experience? And what advice could you give these women that are listening that you feel like could help them?
The first thing I'll share is like, not something I talk about a lot, but I feel like it would be helpful. We, in that first 12-hour period where we were figuring out what was going on, it ended that like my husband had an MRI, and I wasn't there when they came into the room to give him the results because we had a nursing baby, and I had left him with a neighbor, and I didn't have milk. I didn't have anything. You know, I wasn't ready for this. And so it had been 7 hours, and I had to go home because he was dying. Our neighbor was like, I don't know what to do. And, you know, and so, so he was alone when they came back into the room. They had done an MRI. Then I left. And then they came back in the room, and he was alone, and they said, we found something in your brain. So then I was able to go back to the hospital maybe 2 hours later and be with him. But then I had to leave again because I had this little baby. And so what happened was I walked to the elevator, and a nurse kind of accompanied me down. And I just, like, because everything changed, like everything about my life and about my future and, you know, changed in that instant. And so she's with me going down the elevator, and I just had a sense of like, I gotta get away. You know, I didn't want anyone around me. And so I walked to our car, and I opened the door, and I sat inside, and I just started screaming. Like, screaming. I didn't know what else to do. Like, it's so much and so shocking and so like horrible news. And so I was just screaming. And so I think I say that not to put it on anyone, but to just recognize that like when this happens, and I have friends who had husbands, you know, die in minutes. Like they went to work and then they didn't come home. You know, like I think death presents in so many different ways, and finding out about death, and whether it's disease or accident or whatever. But there is an initial reaction of like it's so much you can't even take it in.
To even process it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to have people realize that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay when that emotion just hits you.
Yeah.
No matter how much it is, you can just let it out. That's probably the best thing you could have done. Probably in that moment. I mean, those feelings that you, such deep feelings.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is, I know this is such a vulnerable topic, and I think women will feel so grateful to hear someone that's willing to talk about the hard.
Yeah.
And willing to be able to show how to make it through that, because I'm sure there's a lot of women that are thinking, can I make it through this now? And so after that initial just pain, I mean, that was the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was like, I wish this was already the end, but that was just the beginning, I'm sure, of everything else that ensued after that. So how did you take on a family as you're feeling these huge, painful feelings, and then you were expected to be a mom?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Yeah. I mean, there were days where I was like, why do I have a baby? Like it felt like this is the worst thing ever, like, because Jake needed me. Like he hated being in the hospital alone. He did, and so I would try and be there. He had many surgeries and hospital stays, and I wanted to be with him. But then we like have these children and this baby, and there were times where I was like, what is this? This is so stupid. Why is this happening now? But then on the flip side, like no one comforted me. Nothing comforted me more than just holding my baby and being able to nurse him and just be with him and have these moments with my little girls where we could just still do their arts and crafts or go to their school activities, that it like provided the sense of normalcy when the other components of our lives were like crazy and completely not normal.
Yeah.
So I think motherhood was really grounding to me. I can say that, through that experience. And then once he died, like having children also was so hard. It's so hard to be alone and be their only parent. But at the same time, they saved me. Like they gave me purpose and meaning. And what would I have done if he had died and I had no one? And they were remembrances of him. They each have components of him. I see him in them. And at first I thought I'd be tortured by that. And I now am so comforted by it because it lets him continue to live. It lets Jake continue to be part of my life.
Your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is beautiful. That is beautiful to see that strength that came, that you could see. Obviously it was hard, but to have that at the same time, exactly what you needed.
Yeah.
To go through that exactly how you needed that. How do you feel like your children went through this, and what would you give advice for mothers that are not only processing their own grief, but helping children process grief?
Yeah. That's a good question. I would say, first of all, that you need to learn about grief. Like you need to learn about what it is. Just like if you got diabetes, or if your child you suspect your child has autism, you're gonna dig down and like, what is this? What does this mean? How does it manifest? What does it look like? What can I expect? What should I? And I think people die and we're just like, well, what's that?
We're not, that's true.
I guess you're just sad.
Yeah. We're not trained. We're not trained on like, this is what to expect.
Yeah.
This is the almost kind of predictable process of what you will go through. And even just to know the feelings of what's coming would be helpful. But you're right. We don't do that all. In my degree, we were learning about women going through miscarriages.
Yeah.
And they said the U.S. is one of the worst countries that process miscarriages. But there's so many other countries that will go through a full grieving process.
Yeah.
And they're allowed to have that time and that space to grieve. And in the US, it's almost like you don't ever talk about it until it's over.
Yeah.
And you don't have that support and the people that are willing to show up and be there, because we don't we don't talk about it like other countries do, and we don't have a support system like other countries do. And so
there aren't like the same grieving rites and rituals and permissions too, because I think we think, well, you go, you do the funeral or the service, and like, and that's it. And for a year you're sad, and then you feel better, and you're like, that's not it. That's what happened. And so then I think this stuff is happening, and you're like, then you start internalizing, like, what's wrong with me? Am I broken? Why can't I do this? Why can't I figure this out? Like, and those are all the wrong, unhelpful questions. So I think with children, there is a lot of information out there about how they experience grief, what they are developmentally capable of going through. And
even understanding. Like some of these kids probably can't even tangibly understand as much as obviously an adult can with different stages. Yeah.
Totally. So there were resources I received from our hospice organization that were really helpful. And I read all of them. I read many books about just like, what is grief for children? What does it look like? I was really fortunate to have like widow friends who were, and I feel emotional because they just like were like guideposts for me, you know, who were like decades down the road, but could say like, okay, be aware. And one thing one of them said to me was just like, Jordan, just be aware that like, your kids will grieve this for years, and this may manifest like a decade later.
Wow.
And so don't be surprised by that, or like, wait, what? Because adults, we are able to get in it, feel it immediately. You know, we have vocabulary for it, we have context for it. But kids, like my 2-year-old son, like didn't even have words to say what happened, let alone how he felt about it. But he was feeling things, you know, and he was experiencing things. And so that has come later. Like he had this time. It was like so sad. He was 2.5 when Jake died. And he had this time once he got into kindergarten, first grade, where he started to learn how to read. And Jake had written all of our kids like a Valentine's Day card. And so he knew it existed. Tommy's my son. He knew it existed. He'd seen it, but he's like able to read it for himself. And it's in this little box. And so I had put him to bed and gone downstairs to help another child get to bed. And we both are down. Her room is below his. And we hear him just sobbing. And we're like, what's happening to something? So we run upstairs into his room, and he has this card open that Jake had written him on this last Valentine's Day. And he's reading the words himself and experiencing like, oh, my dad died and my dad loved me, like both of those things. And it was like, I think it was helpful for me to have that frame that like, oh, this is normal, this will happen. I can allow for it.
Wow. And what a tender experience to have that happen, and for him to think of being able to do that for his children. That'd be something that he'll probably hang on to the rest of his life. So these women that told you, you know, hey, we've been through this, what advice do you remember? Any advice they gave you that, you know, like you said, you know, that people, you know, your kids will process things at different ages. Was there anything else they told you that was like, oh, I'm so glad that someone told me this? Do you remember anything that good advice?
Yes,
you know?
And it was pretty dark. There's something that happens when people die. Jake and I would have that experience when we go to his doctor appointments, and it was just so dismal. Like you're in there to learn, like, has the cancer progressed, or you're going to die this month, or do you have 2 more months to live, you know? So it's just like impossible. It's impossibly hard. Like no answer is a good answer. It's just, and so we would have these times where we'd say, well, we can either laugh about it or cry about it. And you just get to these points. And we did both. We did plenty of both. So sometimes I think in the laugh about it stage, you develop this death humor. But one of my friends said that, just like, Jordan, prepare yourself. And it wasn't in a humorous way, but I'm just saying, get ready, it's a little dark. But the idea was just like, prepare yourself to die. She's like, you will die, except you will still be breathing. and you will still be inhabiting a body, and you'll have to get up and do things, but you will have died. Because I think there's something to like when you have a spouse and you have this relationship, like you are each other's half. And so when one of you dies, it's like, and I love my most beautiful, I'm a reader, that's going to come out, obviously, but C.S. Lewis writes this. He has this beautiful book called A Grief Observed. And it's what he wrote after he kind of reflected on his grief experience after his wife died. And that's the way he describes it. It's like, you become a one-legged, he says, I became a one-legged man. And like where people, when they lose a limb, like they know what it was and that it was there and how it worked, except it's not anymore. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And she was right.
So it was horrible. You're like, what
are you telling me? I bet that was so hard, but was it good that she prepped you in that way?
Yeah, I was so grateful to be like, okay, that's what we're looking at. That's what it's going to be like.
And yet you still have to wake up and breathe every day to make it every single day.
Yeah.
How did you make it every single day to wake up and keep going and keep breathing and keep serving as a mom?
Yeah.
How did you do it?
I mean, honestly, Jesus. That's the only way. It's like he just became real for me and was there, just kind of in the trench.
That's really touchy. To think about him being able to take on all of that.
Yeah.
He already had, and he already knows. Probably, I'm sure you felt that no one else could fully relate to you. I bet that was a very lonely, very, very lonely time.
Yes, I think often people kind of think, oh, your husband died, you're lonely. You don't have someone sleeping by you because you don't have someone helping you, and those are real things, but I think that's it. Like the loneliness comes from this experience of like having no one who can relate, and I'm like, he died when I was 35 years old, like no one in my sphere, like
had
it's just not normal. Everyone at 35 is like getting an upgrade on their house and going, on your
yes,
I don't know,
it's that prime time, and your kids are going and all this.
So it's very isolating, which causes that sense of loneliness, combined with the physical loneliness, partnership loneliness.
It's not,
it's layered.
Yes. And that's so true. We tend to just term it as one term, loneliness. Yeah. And yet it has, even just that word and the feeling has so many different levels, so many aspects that the depth of that, other people don't even understand. Yeah. They can't even relate to that. Yeah. Do you feel like I feel like in these situations where I know someone that's grieving or something, and I feel like there's so many people that want to help. Yeah. And from what I've heard of people and friends that have gone through very hard things, a lot of what people do and say is not helpful. And some of the time it's even it's less than helpful. It's even making the situation somewhat worse. Yeah. Was there anything that people did or said that did help you in those moments of true grief?
Yes, there were many things.
Really?
Yeah. First of all, I think just people who would just be with me. Like it's scary when you're on the outside to see someone who's so sad. Like it makes you immediately uncomfortable. You're like, oh, they're so sad. Oh. Yeah. And you feel sad for them, and you want to be tender, but you don't know, and so I think what happens is, unfortunately, people withdraw because they're like thinking, oh, well, I might hurt them, so it's better if I stay away.
Yes.
Or they're so sad. I feel so uncomfortable. I don't know what to do in this situation. So withdraw, and so having people in my life who weren't afraid of it, right? Who weren't afraid of
just
me
show up,
being sad and not having answers and not needing to make it better, but who could just, and like the best kind of example is in the book of Job, like he starts having these plagues, everyone in his family dies, he loses his animals, his home, and then he starts like having physical ailments, and there's a period of time where he has these friends who come and they just sit with him.
I remember that.
And they just sit. And I had that in one of the interviews I did with the grandmothers. She talked about how she spent a lot of time with her son who had lost his wife, and it was in an accident, like left and died in 30 minutes. And she just talked about how like she has learned in interacting with people who are in grief that you don't need to do anything or say anything.
Wow.
But just have the courage to like be there. Mm-hmm.
Be there.
So that was helpful. I think people who would point me to the Savior was helpful, because sometimes you get in this place where you're like, this is so dismal and so despairing, and not point me to him like, well, remember to read your scriptures and say your prayers, but just like, like sharing like their faith in him and his ability to help me, to strengthen me, to be there for me. That came many times when I, like, my own faith was stretching pretty darn thin.
Yes.
So
and
that,
in those darkest of times, to be that light.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And then I think there is an element to like functional help that if you're afraid to sit with a person, if you don't know how to point them to Jesus, don't want to, aren't there yourself, there's also just like a really top layer like functionality help that everyone can do. When you have a family who's lost someone, who has children, like there is automatically things you can do. Just think in
like
your mind
laundry,
what you're doing for your family. I have to go to the grocery store. I have to clean the car out. I have to fold laundry, wash laundry, right? And so I had people who would just offer those specific things.
Wow.
Because sometimes people say, well, let me know if you need help or if there's anything. But you, the grieving person, are already so burdened by your life, you can't think to organize and tell people. But I'd have people say like, hey, I want to take your car out and get it washed and vacuumed and bring it back to you. Like, what? You're like, leave the key on the doorstep. And then we had another neighbor who was like, I want to do your laundry. Just put it on the doorstep and I'll pick it up in the morning. Just took it away. I had so many people send me gift cards. I loved gift cards. They were like the very best. And anyone can do that, because I have to feed a family. I have to feed them every day, so sending gift cards to the grocery store to feed. And then we had people who just did really kind things to kind of help us still enjoy life. So we had people give us tickets to like a Suns game. We went to an Arizona Cardinals game. We had someone just give us like money and said, use this to go do something with your kids, so just because you're there, like, your resources are going to just keep your husband alive.
Yes.
And so it was so nice. That was something really helpful too. So I feel like there are layers of wherever you are personally, like, okay, I can't sit with someone, I don't feel comfortable with that, but like, man, you for sure can send them something in the mail or offer a specific thing. I had one friend, this is like the most specific, but it was so lovely. Like at the end of the year, how often as mom, you like make a treat for your kids' teachers and a card and to say thank you or whatever. So it's like nearing the end of the year, Jake just has a brain surgery. And that's the last thing on my mind. But I still have these teachers who have been so wonderful with our kids this whole up and down year. And so she just says to me, like, Jordan, I am making these little treats for my kids' teachers. Can I make some for yours? And I was like, yes. You know, and I
so
think it was on me to often say yes, because I think sometimes the person, you're like, no, we're fine.
It's okay, it's okay.
We can do it. I don't need
Yeah.
like, just say yes. Yes. Anyway.
That is so beautiful. And that is so true. I think as women too, it's like we have this like, I need to be strong. I need to be strong for my kids. I need this. And then we don't accept that help. And people are willing. I feel like there's so many people that they're just sitting there kind of like, oh, what should I do? I think a lot of it is that it's not that people don't want to show up, and it's not like they won't make the time or the energy or they will. They just don't know what. They just don't know what to do. And so to see how many different levels of help that people could just show up as is really, really good to know. You know, like gift cards. You know, if you live states away, you can send a gift card.
Because we had that, you know, our families were here and they would come so frequently, but there's that like tension of like, I'm not there. I can't do anything, you know, so you again rationalize that like, well, what can I do?
What about people that weren't there physically? Do you feel like they could still be there for you emotionally?
Yes.
Like on the phone or video?
Yes. 100%. And I have to say, this is coming to mind, like people praying for us, like meant everything. And I could tangibly feel, we had times where Jade would go in for these brain surgeries where it was just like, what's going to happen here, you know? And just through our family networks, we just elicit people's prayers. And like, there is so much strength in that. And so like, if that is where you can start, you know, praying in whatever faith tradition you have, that is a tangible support.
And you felt it. Wow. That is amazing. Wow. I'm trying to think of so many different places I want to go, because now it's been like opened up to things. Was there anything that people did that you would give advice to that wasn't helpful in the moments, or long term or short term? If people said something, you did something that maybe they were well intending, but it wasn't helpful, so that we can avoid, maybe people that are wanting to support can avoid those things.
This is twofold. I have two ideas on it. So yes, there are things. I think the things that like you say to someone to make you, so the way to look at it is like, is this going to make me feel better about their really crappy situation? Or will this help them? Is my intention to help them feel better? Because sometimes the things we say make us feel better that it's so bad for them. Like, oh, well, I know things will work out and he's probably going to be fine. There's a plan, right? Like, death isn't the end. And you're like, no, it is.
No, it
is.
For
the 2-year-old who will never see his father until
he
dies at a ripe old age.
Yes.
So I think trying to offer explanations to people of like why it happened or the purpose for it, you know, like you are sorting through those questions yourself, and you don't really benefit from
someone else
other
telling
people
you,
giving you explanations. So I think
interesting.
that is helpful.
That is so good to hear, because I think as a lot of the people, it's like problem solve, and they want to go into like, if we can't solve it physically, we can solve it mentally. And so we're going to rationalize some way of telling you why it happened. It's like, actually, that's not helpful. That's really good to hear. It's like, no, don't tell a person why or how,
There's this cool article that I sent to all of our family, and I can't remember, it's like, was in the LA Times, and the lady called it, and it's like the catching circle. And the idea is that like there's a person in the center of the ring, which was Jake, my husband. He has the disease. He is the one dying. Then there's like the next level, which is like me and our kids. He is a part of our immediate family. When he dies, you know, we will be the most affected. Then it's like his parents. This is their child. You know, they are then like his siblings, my parents, my siblings. And so the idea of that is if you can, like, even if you have, say, a friend or a neighbor, like write out the little circle there in the middle, da, 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 da. And the idea is that you should dump out and comfort in. So anyone who is inside of a ring closer to the
that individual
trauma, or the experience, then you offer comfort. So the words you say to them are comforting, the ideas, and then the things, because we all have things we need to dump. We're freaking out. Jake has friends who even now are like, how did he die? I can't believe it. He didn't, what happened? How did this,
still going through all
and like
of
that,
this,
those are totally appropriate things to think and to feel.
Yes.
But just don't say them
to you,
to Jake or to me.
Yes.
Say them to people that outside of your ring.
Oh, and that makes so much sense too. And if people followed that, I could see this whole process going a lot more smoothly instead of getting that mixed up. And like you said, someone coming to you and it's like, wow, crossing it with you, and you're like,
I can't believe this. This is so terrible.
Like,
it's awful. And then because what it does is it makes me have to be the person like, no, we're going to be okay. I'll comfort you. It like switches.
You turn into that role. Oh, that's
the order.
Interesting.
So anyway.
That's true, because someone there is like, okay, now I'm the one comforting you.
Yeah, right.
Like, no,
so it adds on another layer. So it's just like a way to conceptualize it that was very helpful.
Yeah.
Because again, it's not saying we're going to negate that we're feeling things or we're reacting to things.
Just do it to the right people. Yeah. Because everybody needs the support. Everybody needs that. But make sure that you're not adding more to someone else's,
Yeah. And then the second, I have one other component to this that was something I didn't expect to learn, but that hand in hand with things that were hard, that people said that weren't great, that you experienced, on the other side of that, when that happens and people say things and you get justifiably upset and mad and angry. I had a period of time where that was just happening, and it was like I was holding all of that in, and I realized like those feelings of resentment, of anger, of frustration are adding to the burden I'm already carrying. And like me just being sad and working on keeping Jake alive and doing whatever we could as long as we could was enough to carry. And so I learned. It took a long time and it wasn't my favorite learning, but I really feel that that's important, that the grieving sufferer, leave space to let those feelings go and to not add to your pain and your grief by also carrying a load of anger and resentment to other people. And for me, that came through repenting and forgiving.
Wow, that shows a very, very mature mindset to be able to introspect deep enough, because I'm sure a lot of people go through an experience like this and they're feeling every emotion and they're
100%.
being able to understand, okay, I'm feeling all of this pain. Is all these other feelings serving me? Is it not serving me? How can I, like you said, there's some things I have to carry, and there's some things I don't have to carry, And I
was double burdening myself by choosing to carry it all.
Wow. And I bet that was freeing in a way to be able to process that, go through that.
And they were experiences that took time. Like that wasn't,
it's not overnight.
No. Some was even like a year or two after my husband died, of coming to peace, being able to speak to people, come on the same page, but like the relief that came from that forgiveness and understanding was real.
I've been studying forgiveness for a while, and one of my favorite quotes has been, forgiveness is to set a prisoner free and realize the prisoner was you. And I've loved that, because that's really it. It is freedom. It's a type of freedom that people don't look into and realize how important it is and how much it can affect you when you stay that prisoner. And I think that's amazing that you discovered that so early on, because I'm sure people could be in a situation like you and go decades.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it wasn't overnight, but the fact that you could really go through this in a number of years is amazing. That's very inspiring to see the strength that you had to go through something like that.
And you don't like saying that, you're the burden when you have every reason to be mad, but you can also to some degree choose the weight that you carry.
Yeah. Wow. So now that you've been able to go through everything that your kids have gone through, years of grief, as a mom, and as you've been studying a whole, PhD on grief, what are things that you wish you would have known that it's like, oh, like you went through it yourself, you're probably learning so much.
Yeah.
Like, what are those bits of like these golden nuggets that were like, oh, if I would have known that, it could have helped so much, or it would have maybe changed a situation, or what are those golden nuggets that you feel like you've come across? I'm sure there's a lot. I'm sure we could talk for hours. I mean, the amount of time that you've...
I feel there are, but I also feel like it was like, that was part of like what was so beautiful in this experience is like, I was given things along the journey that I didn't know before. I didn't anticipate, right? Like but I just feel like helps came. And so I think one thing I wish I had done sooner, and I still like, it's something I'm trying to do, is just like to be very open to opportunities that come, thoughts that come, experiences that come, that can bless our children. I think that is important. I think maintaining a level, I did a lot of therapy, so I had a counselor that I saw through Jake's. He was sick for 27 months, and then I spoke to her for probably 2 years after he died. So that was huge for me. So I would say, don't wait if you have had the sense or advice from others to like seek professional help. That was huge.
Get the professional help. Do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some people want to like wait, well, let me get through the illness or whatever, and then I will. And like, that was really beneficial. He got diagnosed in January, and I started seeing her in April.
Wow. Did you just decide that? Did anybody give you that advice, or?
Yeah. Well, I had, at the time I was just reeling and like, and so we were in a church event, and I had a friend who I didn't know was in counseling herself, but as I was sharing and just kind of unloading, she's like, Jordan, have you ever considered counseling? And I was like, no, but sure, So she gave me her friend's name, and it was important for me because this was like an existential thing, death, where's he going, it was important for me to have someone who had my same faith beliefs about the afterlife and what happens when we die. And so this counselor had that, and then it was really great because she counseled out of her home office because we were in so many hospital settings and just like sterile clinical environments that I just like I had to go to another like office setting and sign in all the papers and have the smells.
I'm sure that almost was the anxiety that would come when you would do.
Like, this, I know this. So I think that for sure, seeking out help. I think as far as the kids, kind of being open, I had a lot of help come open to their behavioral issues because they just are hurting so bad. And so I think learning about grief was important. I did it, but that's something, you could do sooner, earlier. And then just being aware of kind of how they're acting and speaking, because there's this fine line that they're hurting and they need to get some of these things out.
Right.
But there was a time where one of my daughters, it was so extreme, and she was just treating everyone so bad, like everyone, all the extended family, whatever. And it's born of pain, but it's like this, if this continues and goes on and on, it's not going to help her. And so kind of learning and having people talk to me about those things, because I think there is a sense when you are so worn down, you just don't want to parent anymore. Right. It's so hard. It's taxing. And so I think being open to other people's observations of your family, if open to those ideas, what they're seeing that you might not be seeing because
you can't. Yeah. You're just trying to breathe at that point.
And not that they're putting on, never had anyone put on, well, you should be doing this and you should
be. Right. Doing out of
terrible.
True concern, true love and concern for your kids and your family. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did your children, I'm guessing at some point, did they get counseling? Did they?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So they all went in. My 3 girls, when we moved, they did about a year of counseling, and then my son was still only 3 and at that time just didn't have, but then when he was like kind of that same age, 6 or 7, just started having this period of like sleepless, like nightmares every night, and would come into my room and just would wake up, and it was pronounced and went on. And at the time I had a friend visiting, and it was just kind of going on. It was like, oh, this is annoying. But I had a friend visiting, and she said, Jordan, has Tommy ever done any counseling? And I was like, no. And she was studying in a social work program. She's like, I wonder if that would be helpful. And maybe that's, kind of what he's going through. And so this was 3 years later, because again, you get in that, even though I said, I knew it would come, but you just kind of get going and forget. So then I signed him up, and he went in for play therapy, and I was there for some sessions, and we were able to kind of share things and help him know about things that happened that he didn't know about, didn't remember.
Neat. And I know about play therapy. Can you explain a little bit? Because some people have no idea kind of what that is.
So it's just a modality of therapy for children who can't necessarily talk for an hour and say all their words, but they have a room full of toys. And so they have them just get down the toys, whatever ones they want, and start arranging them. And then the therapy is just the therapist saying, oh, what are they doing? What's this? What's happening here? And usually children reveal through play the concerns that they have and the things that they're worried about.
And so do you feel like those behavior things that you saw, do you feel like they were helped or remedied by the therapy you went through?
It was helpful.
Wow.
Yeah, it was helpful. That in addition to me kind of, again, having that openness, like, oh, okay, this is more than just he's not sleeping. That's annoying.
Right. And like you said, it's like, oh, another thing, it's not like you're, when you're going through the bottom of bottoms, it's, you don't notice other things that are going on that maybe someone else. And how neat that your friend was there at that time.
Yeah.
To be able to be.
I could give that insight. I wish I had known about these books. Like I did not know about the number. When Jake died, we received maybe 4 or 5 picture books for children.
So these are children's books.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because at the time, my oldest is 10, my youngest is 2. And so, and we kind of read some, but literature is another way for children who don't have vocabulary or experience to kind of process their experience. And so then, I started this project, maybe my youngest was still young enough that we were able to read through the books, but my older 2 girls were like in junior high, freshman in high school. And so picture books were a little bit beyond them. But I did have a cool thing. Another cool thing that happened with books, in that the first summer we moved here, they had always done this reading camp with a neighbor of ours in Arizona, and I loved it. And it just motivated them to read instead of watch TV the whole day. We still do plenty of TV. Yeah. And so so I told them, like, okay, you're not going to go to that reading camp, but this summer, if you guys read Newbery books, I will give you money. And so we had this kind of challenge that if they read like 20 books, or something like that, then they could earn like $50 at the end of the summer. And so they were very motivated. And so they start reading these and I just picked Newbery books because I knew, like, those are award-winning books. They're generally, and they were in 4th or the summer of 3rd and 5th grade. Okay, so they were kind of that age range where they applied. And so they're reading them, but then they started saying, Mom, a lot of the people in these books are dying. And I was like, what? Interesting. And then it would open up conversations. And then I kind of, after a few of those, was like, wait a minute, what is this? And I look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, it is like almost maybe every other Newbery book deals with death, because Newbery books are
Really?
compelling, right? And nothing is more
Yes.
compelling
Than
than death and what happens and how people survive it.
Wow.
And so it was this like amazing experience of my girls having these books to read, because here they are in this new neighborhood with everyone who has two parents, children, you know, these families.
Yes.
And so there's not even anyone they're seeing in their life who's like
Who's
them.
going through what
And so
they're
that's
going
what the
through.
literature can do. It can show children, you are not alone. There are other people who understand this. Look at how they overcome it, how they make meaning out of it, how they survive it. And that just like happened. But I feel again was just another thing that was like, holy cow.
Like it
so
helped
helpful.
them in deeper levels. Wow. And I think with books, it's so helpful because it can abstract that concept. It's not so vulnerable.
It's not like me
as like,
looking at them like, how do you feel today?
Yeah.
Do you need to, and we, you know, we would have, but and then you
Yes.
get to approach the feelings, but in a safer way.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. Do you happen to have a list of books that I can put, you know, in the
Sure.
like, in this so that people can have ideas and references? Because it sounds like there's a lot of information for children and also for adults. And I would want people to have access to that, because I know there's sadly a lot of people too that would love counseling.
Yeah.
And counseling is definitely getting, I feel like, more and more expensive.
Yes.
And
if you don't have the time, if your insurance won't cover it.
Yes.
And that was a huge thing. I was in counseling, but I also read, I just read books about grief, about death.
Wow.
And that did a lot to help. Like you can learn a lot, experience a lot, understand a lot just from reading books related to what you're going through.
And there's so much out there that we can learn from other people. So I'll get that list from you, and I'll put it in our comments so that people can see, you know, your top rated for adults, maybe your top rated for maybe teens, if there's any top ones.
I don't have teen books. I only have grown up
and younger
picture
ones.
books.
Okay, that's good to know.
But I'd say go to the Newbery for your middle teens, preteens.
Middle teens and preteens. Okay, that is good to know. And then I am super inspired to hear that you decided to write your own book.
Oh, yeah.
And I would love to hear about that, because, you know, you've seen that it's such an impact, and then you decided to write one on your own. So tell me why you decided to write one. Sure. That's beautiful.
And I mean, it kind of goes with my answer of before, that like, how did you do this? And it's Jesus. And so as I was doing the 190 books with the professor, the one thing I noticed as I read through them all is like, some of them had afterlife beliefs or God or the person's in heaven, but there was not one of all of those books that talked about how Jesus understands what you're experiencing right now. Like not one. And I was like, what in the world? And when my kids, you know, when we got the books, I went a few times to like online and to our bookstore, one of the bookstores for our church, to just like, is there anything there? Is there anything?
And there was nothing.
There's nothing.
That is so sad.
Yeah.
And shocking.
Yeah.
When it's like, how do we,
because it's such a beautiful story. It's a story we tell each other in dialogue, you know, like because of Jesus, because he died, we can see our loved ones again. He can understand our feelings of pain, our difficulties. You know, we say that in words, but again, children can't always capture that, right?
Yeah.
Versus if they have a little book that has pictures.
And
so
it's
anyway,
simplified, you know, it's simplified that they can understand it.
Yeah. Wow. So that was kind of the background, you know, and I knew I had that in my mind, like, oh, there's nothing. That's so sad. How is there nothing? And then I just had this cool experience where one night I had put my kids to bed and I went to my room, and I'm a journaler.
Nice.
And so I was like sitting there writing, and I just had come to mind like the first lines of, I didn't know at the time that it was a book, but I just had these like lines come to mind. And it was when my daddy died, I felt sad. Jesus felt sad too. Oh. When my daddy died, I cried. Jesus cried too. Oh. When my daddy died, I was lonely. Jesus was lonely too.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And like it just came. And so then in the next few weeks, I just kind of like worked with that, of like, what are these experiences that we have that he had also? And that it's there. It's in the Bible. Like there are every reference of him experiencing these feelings.
Yes, and over and over and over again. And yet we haven't translated that to children.
Yeah.
Until you.
Well,
until you came along.
So it's cool. So it's that. And then I just really felt it was important to not just say Jesus felt lonely too, but to show it. And so every page in the book that talks about Jesus has a scripture reference. So that I think is for children, but it's also for the adult reading it to the child to know, like, this isn't just stuff we say that sounds good and feels good, but like
it's real.
Yeah,
it's real. Wow. And so you wrote it, you got it illustrated.
Yeah. So I wrote it. You sent it to the publishers, and I had no idea. It was like, I'm not a nobody. I'm not, famous. And so I just thought like, well, that was a good exercise, but then they responded and were like, we are really interested in this. Their feeling was like, we need it to be more broader than a dad dying,
and so you can apply to more people.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I understood that, but it was like, how can I keep, the format was really important. And it was like, how can I keep that without changing the whole thing? But then we decided it would be very easy. And we just made it, when someone I love died.
That's
I
beautiful.
felt sad.
Yes.
Jesus felt sad too. And so every page. And so then there's room there to put in, to think of anyone. Someone you loved who died.
Wow.
Yeah, and then they found an illustrator, and it was really cool. I just was very, felt that was very important. I can't draw worth anything to save my life. But it was like, if the pictures are bad, this isn't going to help anyone, because kids only care about looking at the pictures. And so they found this artist, and she did such a wonderful job. And I found out after I saw the first draft that her own son had died like 6 months before she started working on this project. And it is like, it's almost like I was able to capture in words the experience, and she was able to capture in picture, like what grief looks like.
That is so touching. Yeah. To hear the background, because my aunt lost her husband to early onset Alzheimer's, and she found your book. And my cousin said, I was telling her, like, this woman I'm interviewing, and she wrote this amazing book, and it's for kids. And she's like, oh, my mom just read it to my kids last night. Yeah. Because it's their grandpa that died, and she was reading it over Zoom to her own kids. Like, that's the impact you're having. You had this feeling. I'm sure it wasn't easy to come up with the rest of the book and to make it happen and to reach out to, a publisher. And like you said, it's hard to put yourself out there, and yet, look how much the work you did is blessing lives,
and that's my hope. Like, I never have any, this is not like, oh, I'm going to become a millionaire. That is my feeling. And that, I think, is a big part of what grief has become to me. It's very meaning based. Like, for me, having this experience, having this pain, the only thing that's made sense is to find a way to use it to help other people. Wow. Like, nothing else, everything else I still don't have answers to. I don't know why Jake got cancer. I don't know why he didn't, get spared and miraculously live and to die. Like, there's so many things I don't know, but I do know that what I experienced, I can turn and use to help other people.
And you are. And you have. I mean, that's so inspiring, because I think there's a lot of times that we go through things and we want to help people, and then it's like, oh, would it really help people? Would it really? And then you second guess yourself, and you're just like, oh, well, I'm not the expert. I'm not this. I'm not. And then we just stop, or it's like, oh, I don't have the capacity. And then we just stop instead of saying, but any effort that you give to somebody else will bless them, and in return bless you, so. Wow. And so in your program, how many years have you been in this program now?
Yeah, so it's a 5-year PhD to be a counseling psychologist. So then I could do therapy.
Yeah. Wow.
So I'm in the 2nd year of 5.
Wow, that's so neat. And do you feel like other people that are in your program have also gone through any grief or are their own trials?
Yes.
Is that probably why people are there? Or do you feel like I guess my question is, I feel like have come to the table of knowledge with your own experience. Do you feel like other people have also done the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I think people decide, I want to be a therapist. It's not a job for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's not something before. Well, it is something before that I had considered, but I can see now, like, I didn't have any experience with pain, like real
deep
gut-wrenching pain. You know, I felt for people in pain and was like, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, I had no context for it. So I do think within the therapy realm, you know, there are people who are coming to it because it's like, I know what this is and I want to help people. But I do also think there are people who just by their nature, and I have that in these 2 friends that I would just like go walking with, there are people who by nature are just able to
mourn with those.
Yeah, kind of carry the feelings of others, aren't upset or unsettled by it. And so I think those people are also drawn
to
this profession.
Wow. Okay, so in all of this, is there, as we wrap up and as hopefully these moms that are watching this.
Moms are the best.
Are.
Good job, moms.
That's right. Is there anything that you would want to say? Any words of encouragement that you would give a grieving mom?
Yeah. I think for those who are so new to it and it is like this horrible, shocking reality that you would have these times when I would wake up. Usually you wake up from nightmares and you're like, oh, relief, it's not real. And like when you are new to it, you wake up and it's like, my life is the nightmare. It is. And like what I am living is the worst thing ever. So that is such a tender place. And I don't think doing anything, you know, feeling pressure, feeling anything, but I think just feeling the feelings of that time. You hate it. You don't want to, you want to do anything else but, you know, and like lose yourself in whatever. But I think have the courage to just feel it out and let the process work. I mean, I think I'd just say, like, moms who are grieving, be gentle with yourselves, and moms who are supporting them, know that you are important too. That I think God, life, the universe takes from families, but not from all families, because the families who lose someone need to be supported by the other families. And so instead of considering like, oh, we're just so lucky or so blessed, you're like, oh, so glad that didn't happen to me. Like, use what you have and your resources
to step in
to sustain the people who don't.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, as we wrap up for anything you would say on the topic of hope?
Yeah.
Encouragement, and I love that, like giving that advice of being able to feel it, allowing, because I think that's very, very natural for our human tendencies. We feel pain and we block, we shut out, we push away, we barricade.
Run as fast as we can.
Yeah. It's like that's such a natural way to, when we feel pain, and to let it flow through you. I'm sure is very counterintuitive, but something that is probably one of the best ways to handle it.
Yeah.
So I love that advice. Anything that you'd want to say on hope?
Yeah. It gets better.
Yeah.
And people would say that to me and I would want to punch them in the face, you know?
It's so good to hear. Yes.
I hate you. Don't say that to me. You know?
Yes.
But that is real. Like, time does help. Your kids growing up helps. You know,
Yes.
finding new life, you know, helps. Yes. Integrating meaning helps. But it is slow going. And I wish I could say, oh, well, the studies have shown there's a grief timeline and this is how it works. And so far in any reading I've done, it's very unique.
Personal.
And personal, yeah. But I think one thing that's helpful is like finding someone further along the road. You know, and I know not everyone has resources for that, but like seeking that out, asking people, people know people who know people, and pointing to someone, whether you've lost a child or a spouse or, your parents, but finding someone who is just a little further ahead can give you a lot of confidence that like, okay, maybe I can do that too.
Maybe someday I can get there. I'm not there now, but there's hope that I can get there someday. Wow. And then I see you thriving, happy, beautiful, taking on the world, doing a PhD, raising 4 kids, writing a book. Wow. How does it look standing where you are now and looking backwards?
Yeah.
How does that feel?
I mean, I think now I am on solid ground again. Which brings with it its own like, comfort. I think I now am kind of straddling this, like, I don't want to get so comfortable on solid ground that like the things that, this is a unique thing, because the things that before upset me or I spent a lot of energy on, the 90% of those don't matter. I don't care about them anymore. Like if my house is perfectly clean or decorated, if all the, dishes are put away, if my kids have all their hairdos and which I think by nature those matter. And those, I'm not saying they don't matter, but I think what happened to me is it just clarified like fundamental.
What is important and what really and what's isn't.
Not. And so I think that is kind of the next like task, being in a stable, normal, life. It's like not losing those lessons that I learned from grief.
Or that time. I'm sure that the gift of time, that you have. Wow. I love all of that. Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
So inspiring.